I thought we would begin by entertaining testimony on the three bills that have to do with putting a price on carbon. That's H-1726, sponsored by Representative Benson. S-1821, an act combating climate change. I'm the lead sponsor of that one. And S-1869, sponsored by Senator Mark Pacheco.
Thank you so much. I know the Vice Chair of Ways and Means is here, and he would like to mention a couple things.
Thanks very much. So I represent a very large rural district in western Massachusetts where intuitively many people might think that this is not a very attractive proposal because people have very high energy costs because we have very little public transportation, no public transportation in most areas. And one of the things that attracted me to support this bill is that there is a premium for people who live in rural areas in terms of a 30% bonus. And it's also very attractive, as the chairwoman mentioned, that regional projects to address energy use are eligible here. And we have a strong ethic in Franklin and Hampshire counties, in fact in all of Western Mass, for regional cooperation between municipalities.
I'm Representative Goldstein-Rose. By the end of this hearing, you'll have listened to many different perspectives as to why Massachusetts should put a price on carbon pollution. The reality is that Massachusetts' own emissions are insignificant in the big picture of global warming, and yet Massachusetts is going to be hit with the full impacts unless we solve the problem globally. Our unique contribution will not simply be reducing our emissions, it will be developing cheap, clean energy technologies that we can patent here and sell to the rest of the world. And this is the greatest economic development potential for our state that will exist in the next few decades. Already there's a growing national demand for energy storage technologies. There's no state that's staked out a role as the center of that new industry. During this current legislative session is when states who wish to be serious competitors for the energy storage industry must start making bold moves. Yes, carbon pricing will keep money in state and create jobs, but the most significant benefit of carbon pricing is that it will create a market environment in Massachusetts that will drive a demand for cheap, clean energy and will attract companies to move here to commercialize their new technologies. Yes, carbon pricing will allow us to meet our Paris and Global Warming Solutions Act commitments, which no other policy will do. But again, the greater benefit is that carbon pricing will signal to the whole world that Massachusetts is the place to come for clean energy innovation. If we want that economic development, we have to put a price on carbon now while the industry is just beginning to exist. Finally, I want to address the political concerns that some legislators have regarding carbon pricing. Some agree it's sound policy, but believe it will not pass this session or perhaps any given session. And I've talked with colleagues that agree it would be beneficial to the economy, and yet we're afraid they wouldn't be able to effectively communicate about it to their constituents or would risk re-election. And others see the benefit of tens of thousands of jobs, but then say we shouldn't claim that benefit for fear of a few companies that might need to change their business model or go out of business. The fact is, legislators almost never lose an election because of one vote, though of course we will face pushback for any forward-thinking step that we take. And also, we know that it will only ever be implemented nationally if Massachusetts leads the way first. So it's our job as legislators to be objective and to explain our decisions effectively to the public. If messaged correctly, carbon pricing can easily be supported by a significant majority of Massachusetts residents, voters, and businesses. We must abandon the notion that carbon pricing cannot pass this session. Indeed, it must happen this session, or the greatest benefits in establishing Massachusetts as a center for this new industry will be lost. Carbon pricing policy has been around for multiple sessions and has been refined again and again. The turnout here demonstrates that there are thousands of advocates all around the Commonwealth who are ready to have our backs if we take our bold step. I suggest this should be referred favorably and passed this summer. This will leave half a year for relevant agencies to prepare for implementation, and the price can go into effect January 1st, 2018. Dividends should be mailed quarterly so that no one has to go too long before getting enough money to cover their costs or make investments in efficiency, but also so that voters will have received 3 dividend checks before the next election. This should allay any concerns our colleagues have about the political implications for them. Also, having physical dividend checks with an explanation of policy written on them will build awareness and understanding in the public and allay the concerns some residents have that the proceeds from the carbon price might not actually get back to them. We can show the benefits concretely. I would love to be helpful to the committee in any way to get a bold carbon pricing policy passed this summer.
Representative Peisch.
constituents who are here in support of the bills, and only one of whom is going to testify, and it will be under 3 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chairman Barrett and Chairman Goldstein. I think it's time to act. I think it's time to act real soon. And why 1821? I think because it's important to act soon, it is very important to find legislation that appeals equally to progressives and to conservatives. And this bill is right down the pipe of something that anybody who believes in science can support. So I urge you not to overthink this. Let's get it passed.
My name is Aaron Regenberg. As you said, I'm a state rep from Rhode Island. I appreciate your Massachusetts hospitality in having me here today. I was proud this year to introduce carbon pricing legislation in the Rhode Island General Assembly. There's every reason to take this step, even if you're just thinking about the issues within your state, but I'd make the case that there's an additional reason beyond your borders for you as Massachusetts legislators to consider. Massachusetts has always been a leader when it comes to forward-thinking policy, from public education in previous centuries and this one, to marriage equality, and so much more. What happens here in Massachusetts has a ripple effect across our country, and that ripple effect is particularly strong here in our region. In my state, folks are always using policies that Massachusetts enacts or doesn't enact to justify taking or not taking similar action in Rhode Island. Your leaders here, and this is a moment in the history of our climate and the history of human civilization when we need leaders to step up. Taking a bold stance on carbon pricing in Massachusetts will absolutely pave the way for those of us in surrounding states and states across the country to follow your lead. We need an admiring neighbor. I urge you to take that responsibility seriously and to lead. Thank you.
I'm the Dean of the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston and one of the founders of the Sustainable Solutions Lab. And prior to this, I spent 10 years in state government in both Republican and Democratic administrations working in the weeds on developing clean energy and climate policy, including with many of you in crafting the Green Communities Act and the Global Warming Solutions Act. In the Commonwealth, we are a beacon to other states and even nations when it comes to our climate and clean energy policy. The list of accomplishments in solar, wind, storage, and energy efficiency is long and continuing. The Energy Diversity Bill last summer. So with all this success, then why am I here today? Because all of these achievements are not enough. Not enough to reach our statutory goals for emissions reductions, and not enough to seize the growing economic benefits of moving faster to the clean energy future. And I speak today in support of Senate Bill 1821 and House Bill 1726, and in support of carbon pricing in general. Without such pricing, the state will not be able to reach the mandate of the Global Warming Solutions Act to reduce 80% by 2050.
I'm Gilbert Metcalf, professor of economics at Tufts University.
My name is Christopher Knittel, and fittingly, I'm the George P. Schultz Professor of Applied Economics at MIT.
As well as being a professor of economics at Tufts, I also served in 2011 and 12 as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Environment and Energy at the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And I'd like to make 3 points today. My first point is a carbon fee is an efficient way to reduce emissions. Market-based mechanisms, such as a carbon fee, are cost-effective, meaning that they achieve a given reduction in pollution at minimum cost to society, lowering the cost by as much as 50% or more relative to command and control regulation, as we saw with the SO2 trading program. A carbon fee also contributes to economic efficiency by avoiding the price volatility that can occur with cap-and-trade systems, since with a carbon fee the price is fixed through legislation. Since energy investments tend to be capital intensive and long-lived, reducing uncertainty about future carbon prices reduces the risk of clean energy investments, and this is important for businesses in their long-run planning efforts. Point 2, rebating revenue should not affect the market signal. At an initial rate of $10 a ton, a carbon fee would raise about $500 million per year, and importantly, none of the revenue under two of the bills we talked about today would go into state budget coffers, but rather would be rebated to Massachusetts residents and businesses. This design has two features which I want to emphasize. The first is a policy with equal-sized rebates to all residents is highly progressive. This is similar to the bipartisan carbon dividends proposal at the national level that was endorsed today by 11 major corporations, including ExxonMobil, Shell Oil, and General Motors, as well as prominent thought leaders across the political spectrum. Second, the rebate to employers is tied to the number of employees that the firms have in the Barrett bill. Thus, the rebate structure supports job creation in Massachusetts. Combined with the fact that we would be sending less money out of state to purchase imported fossil fuels, the bill will, on balance, increase employment in the state. I'm often asked by my students why a carbon price will reduce emissions if we turn around and give the money back. After all, they say, people are smart enough to understand that the higher price of energy will just be offset by the rebate check that they get from the state. It's a good question, but here's where my students get it wrong. First, the fee raises the price of energy relative to other goods, and we know that households and businesses shift spending away from goods whose prices are going up towards goods whose prices are not rising. And economists call this a substitution effect, and it is a very powerful economic incentive. At the same time, the individual rebate is tied to the average carbon fee paid by all 6.8 million Massachusetts residents, and so my actual rebate will be unaffected by my actual carbon payment, so it will stay the same. My final point is that carbon pricing has been used successfully elsewhere. Most people are familiar with the experience of British Columbia, which has priced carbon since 2008. Revenue from the tax is returned in the form of lowering other taxes as well as personal rebates. And a statistical analysis that I have published shows that economic growth in the province was unaffected by the tax. The province grew as rapidly, if not more so, than other Canadian provinces and more rapidly than Canada as a whole. So to sum up, a carbon fee can reduce emissions in a highly cost-effective way without raising the overall fiscal burden on Massachusetts residents and businesses, and in fact, it can be a win-win policy for Massachusetts. Thank you.
Great. I think it's also important to stress that we cannot solve climate change alone with technology, that we need smart, effective, and efficient policy. I want to make 3 points. The first is a price on carbon is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The second is a price on carbon is essential for the Commonwealth to meet its 2050 goals. And third, that even if we set aside climate change and just focused on the local pollution benefits and the benefits coming from congestion and other traffic-related issues, a price on carbon can be supported and warranted. So the joke is that economists rarely agree. This is one issue that I think economists do agree, and it's unanimous that a price on carbon is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that when I go to buy a gallon of gasoline and use that gasoline, it produces about 18 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. Putting a price on those 18 pounds will fix my incorrect decision as if we didn't have a price on carbon. It might be more important, though, to stress the converse of what I just said, which is that we currently do have a price on carbon. It's just zero for gasoline. And if we think about electricity, we do have RGGI, but the price on carbon for electricity is only $2.50. So effectively, we are subsidizing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there can be legitimate reasons to subsidize some products, like solar panels or electric vehicles, but it's really hard for me to come up with a good reason to subsidize pollution, and that's effectively what we're doing. The second point is that a price on carbon is essential to meet our 2050 goals. No other policy has the same breadth in terms of the behavioral changes that policy institutes. Consumers, when they face a price on carbon, will have an incentive to use fossil fuel-based products more efficiently, such as driving more efficiently. They'll also have an incentive to invest in energy efficiency, whether it's insulation in their homes, a more efficient furnace, or a more efficient vehicle. But also firms will have an incentive to invest in R&D. And as I mentioned earlier, although technology is not sufficient, technology and policy are the two most important factors to drive our solving climate change. So thank you very much, and I'll take questions.
We have now abdicated responsibility at the federal level for taking any serious action on climate change, and I think it really behooves the states to step forward and pick up that slack. And I think it is critically important both for getting these long-lived investments in place now that we're going to need, that we don't squander more time that we need in order to begin to make the move to a green economy, and also to set the stage from state-level action moving forward, as we saw Rhode Island is waiting to hear from Massachusetts, to begin to get these kinds of positives, political spillovers into other states that begins to move us towards a national carbon policy.
I'm Jim Stock. I'm a professor at Harvard in the economics department and at the Kennedy School. From 2013 to 2014, I was a member of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, where my responsibilities were macroeconomics and working on the Clean Power Plan, social cost of carbon, and that sort of stuff. I was the lead economist in the White House on those topics.
My name is Mark Breslow. I'm an economist and policy director for Climate Exchange. Under Governor Deval Patrick, I worked on climate policy at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and was lead author of the state's Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2020. In 2014, I co-authored the Department of Energy Resources study that analyzed the feasibility and impacts of a carbon fee system in Massachusetts.
My main message today is that the bills in front of us are going to be ones in which you'd see pretty small overall economic effects. I think they're likely to be positive economic effects for the state of Massachusetts. The two things that are special about Massachusetts are, first of all of our fossil fuels are imported. We get them from other states or we get them from abroad. So if they're a little more expensive, you buy a little less of it. That means that less money goes to other states. More money is then rebated to the consumer, and that consumer on the margin is going to spend a little more of it going to restaurants or going to retail sales, and a little bit more of it is spent in Massachusetts. When you run the numbers, it's a small effect, a positive bump. Second thing is that we've got a low-carbon economy already in Massachusetts. So if we were in Louisiana, we'd be worried, my gosh, what about the refinery? But the order of magnitude here is a completely different one. The third is a special feature, and especially of 1821, but also 1726, which is that the fee is rebated on a per-employee basis for the expenditures that come from businesses and nonprofits. So if you're a business, what you see is you're paying a little bit more for fossil fuel energy and you're paying a little bit less for people, so you're going to switch away from fossil fuel energy and you're going to switch towards people. The DOER study from 2014 that Mark worked on is, I've reviewed it and I've checked whether, we've had a lot of changes in the economy and maybe changes in the academic literature. I think it's a pretty good benchmark, pretty reliable for what the effects would be today. Let me just reflect just for 1 minute on the broader context. There's really three different approaches towards climate mitigation, emissions mitigation. There's a carbon fee approach, there's a cap and trade approach, and there's the regulatory approach. Now, when I was in the White House, we really pursued the regulatory approach, and that's because it's not because that's what our first choice was. That wasn't our first choice. That's because that was all we could do, and we felt it was essential that we do something. We have the opportunity for Massachusetts to take the lead with the opportunity of the reset button to do it the right way, and the right way is through a carbon fee.
Both bills, in large part, follow the recommendations of the Department of Energy Resources study that I co-authored in 2014. I'm going to focus on the impacts of the carbon pollution fee and rebate system on households at different income levels and on different types of industries. I conclude that when the fees and rebates are combined, the net impacts will not be burdensome. The result is that on average, lower income households will do better than higher income ones. My analysis shows that the lower 60% of households ranked by income will get rebates higher than the fees that they pay, thereby coming out ahead. I believe that Senate 1821 is equitable in that it protects low and moderate income households, even if they actually do nothing to cut their energy consumption. For House 1726, 20% of the money goes into the Green Infrastructure Fund. That means there's less available for rebates. In order to still protect low and moderate income households, we designed that bill to shift some of the rebate money from high to low income households. The result is that the lower 60% of households still see, on average, a net gain. In designing these bills, there was substantial concern about households who have to drive significantly more than average, particularly those in rural areas. Both bills provide a 30% higher rebate to such households from the portion of the funds that come from gasoline sales, which we think will adequately protect most such households. Now, for employers will, as a group, will receive back the funds that they paid in. It means that all employers, across all of them, will come out even. Under Senate 1821, as was said, employers receive rebates in proportion to their number of employees. I did a detailed analysis of the impact industry by industry of what this would cause. And what I find is, for most of the industries in the state, the impacts are generally small compared to their overall revenues, which is consistent with the professor's findings, less than 0.1% of their total revenues. Most of the state's leading industries will come out slightly ahead under this system. A few energy-intensive sectors will come out slightly behind, with cost increases, however, still well below 1% of their total costs. Finally, in order to protect vulnerable employers, both bills allow the Department of Energy Resources to provide additional assistance to industries that face significant negative impacts, and that would include, for example, industries that face intense interstate competition. So finally, in conclusion, by rebating the funds in a progressive manner, we can provide equity to both households and to businesses while substantially cutting carbon pollution and taking a major step forward to stop the threat of climate change. Thank you.
But you can't forget the challenge we're facing is tremendously difficult. We have trillions of dollars of infrastructure of fossil fuels in place. We have to do trillions of dollars of transition nationally to make this work. The longer we wait, the worse the problem is going to be, the more challenging the transitions are, and the more CO2 we're going to be emitting as a consequence. So it's incredibly important that we get started now, we do it efficiently now. Whether we hit 2020 or not is actually really beside the fact.
I'm Ann Kelly. I'm Director of Policy for Ceres, a nonprofit in Boston.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Kimmel. I'm the president of the Union of Concerned Scientists. Before my current position, I was the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection in Massachusetts, and I chaired the RGGI program, which was the first mandatory carbon pricing program in the United States. The Union of Concerned Scientists enthusiastically supports the two carbon pricing bills that are before you. We know that we need to reassure an anxious world that the United States is still in this fight and we have not abdicated. We know that we need to make sure that the clean tech firms who would like to locate here and across the United States know that they have a place. And we need to reassure young people that we're not kicking this problem down the road for future generations. So for all those reasons, we are very supportive of these bills and very much hope that you will pass them. I'd just like to offer an observation a little bit on the design and on the question of dividend versus investment. And this grows out of my experience in RGGI. The experience in RGGI tells us that putting a price on carbon is very good, but using some portion of the revenues from that price to invest in things that further drive down emissions doubles the money, gets more bang for the buck. And so in RGGI, we took the allowances from the guidance of the legislature and we invested them in energy efficiency primarily, and we made Massachusetts the most efficient state in the country. We created jobs and we kept millions of dollars circulating within our regional economy. That same lesson, I would say, applies here and applies in spades to the biggest problem we face with carbon emissions in Massachusetts, which is transportation. So I would urge you, as part of the design of this program, to leave some room for some investments in green transportation to help us really meet that problem.
Massachusetts lawmakers should heed the calls of the business community to establish a carbon price. A transparent price on emissions would incentivize low-carbon consumer and business choices, accelerate the commercialization of low-carbon technologies, and is the most efficient way to fight climate change. Companies are reducing greenhouse gas emissions and investing in renewable energy, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes good business sense. Clean energy helps businesses to cut energy costs, reduce exposure to the volatility of fossil fuel prices, and to stay competitive. A price on carbon emissions will provide businesses with certainty and predictability. Simply put, carbon pricing is a win-win for the economy and the planet. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Maffei, and I'm from Climate Action Now in Western Mass, and I chair our committee on carbon pollution fee and rebate. Residents of rural towns of Ashfield, Buckland, Conway, and Plainfield and Whately also passed resolutions supporting carbon pollution fee and rebate, along with Amherst, Northampton, and Longmeadow. Why did we do this? We did this primarily because we care about climate and we want to stop the catastrophic effects of climate change, and because we understand that putting a fee on carbon pollution is an essential step to stop climate disruption. However, it is also because we know that the proposed legislation will provide an economic benefit to rural areas and western Massachusetts. First, it will create more jobs in our area, moving energy jobs from out of state to Massachusetts. And these jobs will be distributed around the state, and many of them will be in rural areas and western Mass. Second, the rebate for our region will be larger than the fees we pay. This will add money to our local economy. The two carbon pricing bills are designed so that households with incomes in the lower 60% will come out ahead or even. And because most rural areas have a higher percentage of low-income people, there will be more money in rural economies. Third, rural areas such as Western Mass will also benefit from a rural driving provision. I'm also a member of the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, which is led by Arise for Social Justice, a 30-year-old organization of poor people advocating for poor people. The Arise membership voted unanimously to support carbon pricing legislation. Rural residents and social justice groups are supporting carbon pollution fee and rebate, and we respectfully ask you to do the same. Thank you very much.
My name is Kalila Barnett, and I'm here with Community Labor United.
Hi, my name is John Levy. I'm a professor and associate chair in the Department of Environmental Health at Boston University School of Public Health.
I'm Ari Bernstein. I am the Associate Director at the Center for Health and the Global Environment at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and a pediatrician at Boston Children's.
We are particularly supportive of the carbon pricing policies that invest in a green infrastructure fund.
What I want to do is speak in support of Senate Bill 1821 and House Bill 1726 from the perspective of health co-benefits. And this refers to the health implications of policies that we may pass that are not originally intended to affect health. So transportation policy ultimately is health policy. Energy policy is ultimately health policy. And climate policy is ultimately health policy. All of these things affect how we burn fuels and how we generate air pollutants here in Massachusetts and throughout the region. Earlier this spring, my colleagues and I prepared a report to estimate the health co-benefits of a carbon price within Massachusetts, reflecting closely the fee structure in Senate Bill 1821. So what we looked at was, as those prices went into place, how would that affect emissions of other air pollutants beyond carbon dioxide? What would that do to air quality in Massachusetts and in the surrounding region, and what would the effects on health be? So the punchline from that study is from an implementation date of 2017 through 2040, we estimated approximately $3 billion of health benefits, billion with a B, for residents of Massachusetts and the surrounding region. And this had to do with reductions in premature death, reductions in hospital admissions for respiratory and cardiovascular disease, reductions in heart attacks. This is actually a conservative estimate. We only included a few of the health outcomes that we know are associated with air pollution. We left out asthma attacks for children. We left out missed days of school, missed days of work, a host of other health effects that we know are quite important. One of the most significant things about these health co-benefits is that they occur immediately and locally. The preponderance of them happen in Massachusetts and in surrounding states, and they happen within days or years of implementation. So whereas the climate benefits can be quite diffuse and global in scale, here we are talking about health benefits to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that are occurring locally and immediately. And the findings from our report are supported by a number of other studies in the literature that had very comparable findings.
I am here on behalf of my constituents. My constituents are the children of Boston, the children of this Commonwealth, and where I work, the children of the country and overseas. And I will tell you with every confidence that while your minds may be torn at this moment between 15 different issues, and your minds may be distracted by what's going on in the federal government and who knows what else, I sincerely tell you that there is nothing you can do in this moment to ensure the welfare of all those who are my constituents than passing these bills. It was an honor to work with John and Dr. Jonathan Bunicor on the research you just heard about. But I'll tell you that although the sums are great, they are, as John mentioned, a great underestimate. They do not account for the disproportionate burden of those harms upon the most vulnerable, particularly children. I can write prescriptions for all kinds of things. I can see children in my office at Boston Children's. I can advocate for tobacco-free homes. I can try and address gun violence. But all of that is inconsequential in the face of this problem. And so, Chairman Barrett, when you ask whether this issue should be put off to 2020, I ask all of you to think about those who are not in this room right now, our children, and their generations to come, what they will say looking back on these bills and say, what were they thinking if they didn't do something? What's Massachusetts? We're just a tiny state in New England. And to those I would say, what's the difference that was made under the Clean Air Act by the states that led and ultimately forced our federal government to create what has been arguably one of the best public health successes in U.S. history from a federal policy point?
I'm Sonia Hamill. I'm a recovering state bureaucrat working on climate change and environment.
I'm Peter Shattuck, Massachusetts Director for Acadia Center.
I want to say that setting a price on carbon, such as proposed in these two bills, is a smart way to boost the effectiveness of all of the state programs that work on clean energy and environment. Think of it like running a magnet through iron filings to get them to align. It provides a basis that will align programs in the same direction. Countries all across the world are doing exactly this. And they're doing it for this reason, which is that it aligns and creates a kind of a synergy with the other clean energy programs and works very well. Commonwealth wouldn't be going it alone. You'd be in the company of solid and respectable economies such as Switzerland, Iceland, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Ireland, France, Mexico, South Korea, Chile, Japan, and the United Kingdom. All of those places have carbon pricing of one type or another.
Here on behalf of Acadia Center and also the Alliance for Clean Energy Solutions, which is a coalition of coalitions, as we're calling it, comprised of environmental, business, clean tech, health, and consumer groups, and we've established carbon pricing as a top priority for this session. I wanted to spend my time providing a couple remarks on the example that we have of successful carbon pricing in Massachusetts and the region through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, because I think it teaches us some important lessons. Since the program launched in 2009, we've seen emissions from those power plants decline by almost 50%. At the same time, electricity prices in Massachusetts and other states participating have actually declined by 3%, while over the same time period, prices have increased by 7% across the rest of the country. We've also seen more economic growth. The region has outpaced the rest of the country by 3.6%, and even at the same time as we've reduced emissions 16% more than others. And a lot of that's because we're reducing those fossil fuel dollars that normally flow out of the state, which extending carbon pricing to other sectors would help effectuate the same goal. And I think the real takeaway there is it's impossible to predict innovation. We've had a lot of academics who know what they're talking about and energy modelers, but the whole point of putting a price on carbon is that you drive innovation. When you put a price on something that you don't want, the evidence we have in front of us is that the market reacts, and it reacts quickly. I think we're underselling ourselves in Massachusetts. We have an economy of $488 billion. That puts us in the same league as countries like Sweden and Nigeria. So what we do matters in Massachusetts. And if you look at the 5 states that are considering carbon pricing right now, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and Vermont, adds up to $2.3 trillion. That would be the 7th largest economy in the world. So we really have a chance to lead here.
Asheen Fensay. I'm a corporate sustainability leader and a product manager at Dassault Systems, which is a $3 billion software company located in Waltham.
Hi, I'm J.J. Bartlett. I'm president of Fishing Partnership Support Services, and I'm also a member of the Alliance for Business Leadership.
And my name is Paul Cleary. I'm a member of E2 Environmental and Entrepreneurship Organization, and I am a commercial real estate developer owner.
We've done the model and determined that it's going to be essentially net positive for us financially. And in fact, you can generalize this to pretty much any company that uses natural gas for heating only, not for manufacturing. Any company that doesn't have an operating fleet.
I hope to contribute to today's discussion by describing the human toll of the sudden and dramatic changes in nature. I represent 20,000 fishermen and family members throughout New England. And then one day, the scientists and managers said that something dramatically changed and the cod were gone. New England ground fishermen were left in financial ruin, but strange things are happening with populations of cod, lobster, sea bass, and many other species. It's hard to believe that that's all unrelated to the fact that our New England water temperatures are rising much faster than the global average. I urge you to support a carbon pricing policy in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
My name is Michael Doctor, and as I said, I'm a farmer from Hadley, Massachusetts. I've been earning my living growing vegetables for the past 30 years, and I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what global warming means for us as farmers on the ground and in the dirt. About 8 years ago, I switched my crop mix to root crops because I had a mix of crops that could be drought-resistant, disease-resistant, and could sort of ameliorate and prevent some of these changes that were coming down the pike. I also didn't have any surface water to irrigate, so these were good crops which I wouldn't have to irrigate. I had a contingency plan in the back of my mind in case we really had a significant drought. Maybe I'd have to buy some irrigation at that point. Well, last year, that contingency plan got used, and on early June, on a Wednesday, we realized we needed some water real bad. We called a well drilling company, and by Friday, they were drilling holes. The cost of global warming is not really about drought in Massachusetts. In other parts of the country, that's a big impact. But the cost of global warming in our area is actually about the exact opposite of drought. It's too much water. As the atmosphere warms up, it holds more moisture, and we get these torrential rainstorms of 2 to 3 inches of rain in an hour, and it washes out our crops, seedlings, seeds, and most importantly, it increases disease pressure. These once-in-a-30-year storms that are now happening 2 or 3 times a year, they wipe us out. And we can afford a fee on carbon because we can budget for that. We can plan for it. We can't plan for these storms. If you guys want your kids to be able to eat, we've got to do something today.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.
Hi, I'm Aislinn Jewett, and I'm a member of Mass Climate Youth, and these are some of our fellow members. I am 14 years old, and I speak for this group of teens, many of whom could not be here because it is the last week of school. As youth, nothing worries us more than climate change, and we are here to demand that you take action to address it. We are your future workforce. If you want to retain our talent in Massachusetts, you have to meet our values, our needs. To my generation, nothing is more important than solving climate change. We want climate solutions now, not in the next legislative session. Scientists are screaming that we cannot wait a moment longer. We are here to demand aggressive climate solutions now. Experts in this room tell us that carbon pricing is the most effective free market way to reach our state's emissions goal by 2050. No other solution comes even close. If we lead carbon pricing in Massachusetts, we trigger the Northeast to follow. We trigger the country to follow. Then we start to see significant impact. A state that leads in courageous and creative action like carbon pricing, that is the state where we intend to live and work. By 2050, most of the people in this room will be retired. Some of you may even have passed on.
Mr. Chairman, I object. I strongly object to that statement.
Your careers and lives will not be significantly impacted by this bill's passage. But what about us? In 2050, we will be between 45 and 50 years old, at the height of our lives and careers. We want to live in a world where we are safe, where we can be productive and functional adults. None of us want to bring children into a world that is wreaked with scorching temperatures, disappearing coastlines, choking pollution, famine, and devastating storms. We should be able to live here in Boston without fretting that the next storm or breaking ice shelf will turn our city into Atlantis. But if aggressive laws like carbon pricing are not passed, this is the future we are facing. As public servants, what are you driven by? Science? Doing right by us, your children and grandchildren? The intelligence to act at this dangerous moment in human and geologic history? What else could you be driven by that remotely compares in importance to these three things? Science. Doing right by your children. The intelligence to act at this dangerous moment in history. Fossil fuel pollution is a crime against my generation.
I'm Jim Antal, and since 2006 I've been the leader of the largest Protestant denomination in the Commonwealth, the United Church of Christ.
Matthew Soffer, I'm a rabbi at Temple Israel of Boston, the largest Reformed Jewish congregation in New England.
I'm here to tell you that our 360 churches, 840 clergy, and 65,000 members here in Massachusetts care about climate change. In fact, 2 recent denominational polls identify climate change as our #1 justice issue because it amplifies all other justice issues. We're not alone. As you'll hear from my 2 colleagues, people of every faith perspective are increasingly concerned about climate change. What do we want? We want to preserve God's great gift of creation for countless unborn generations. Humanity's current path will sentence our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come to famine, drought, fire, virus, pestilence, and civil disorder. What do we want from this process? We want fairness and truth. As my good friend Naomi Oreskes from Harvard wrote in the Boston Globe last month in an op-ed piece, putting a price on carbon will level the playing field, allowing Massachusetts to shift to a clean energy future. As for truth, like it or not, our generation stands on the hinge of history. That's what the headlines tell us every day. In 1701, it was a member of our Old South Church in Copley Square, Samuel Sewall, who published the first anti-slavery tract in America. Samuel Sewall told the truth about slavery in 1701. He was early, but no one here would say he was too early. Though these two bills, or through these two bills, you and your fellow Massachusetts legislatures have an opportunity to tell the truth about climate change and become the first state to pass legislation that will require us to pay the true cost of energy from fossil fuel. What do we want from you? We want leadership. Leadership on the most significant moral crisis humanity has ever faced. With these two bills, you have an opportunity to live up to the inspiring vision of John Winthrop, which he preached almost 400 years ago. We shall be as a city on a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Thank you.
As a rabbi, when I consider how our children will relate to their past, to us, I tremble. We're making it nearly impossible for our children to honor us, for when they come to know how we have treated our natural world, how will they possibly be able to fulfill that commandment to honor their fathers and mothers? Every tomorrow is Children's Day, and what we give to them, our love for the world that is their inheritance, will determine whether or not they are able to fulfill the commandment to love us. So I urge you to support this legislation, and I thank you for your consideration.
I'll just state where I'm from. Breckenridge Capital Advisors is a business here in Massachusetts. We represent investors nationally.
Dave Miller, I'm Executive and Managing Director of the Clean Energy Venture Group. We are the largest and most active private investment group in the country investing in early stage clean energy technology companies.
First of all, that a carbon price does come about, which I think any investor would say is the best way to plan ahead. It's something that is in this bill. It scales up gradually. It's something that investors will be able to do as opposed to the other forms of carbon pricing we see, which are more implicit in the economy and which, particularly with regard to the utility sector, have left planning a difficult game.
Carbon pricing is the most effective policy to grow the clean energy economy and help establish economic leadership in the region in which it takes place. I'm also a research affiliate at MIT Sloan School of Management. I did my PhD about 10 years ago, and my dissertation was developing a model of clean energy ventures, a simulation model that looked at the factors that contribute to their rate of success and their rate of growth, and looked at the effect of policies. And I looked at a broad range of policies, including subsidies, market policies, as well as pricing carbon. Pricing carbon was the most effective policy out of any potential thing that could be done by the government with respect to subsidies, market clearing, and so forth, by an order of magnitude on the rate of success as well as the rate of growth. Other policies were helpful, but pricing carbon was a magnifier. It helped all other policies, and it helped them, again, by an order of magnitude. It's what tilted the game. The key is that the price be fixed and that it grow over time so that there's certainty in investors and entrepreneurs. We know it's coming, we know how it's rising, and that affects behavior across the entire economy, the creation of companies, and the increase in investment.
I'm with Zevin Asset Management. We're a Boston-based firm. I'm Pat Tomeno. We're a Boston-based firm that's been investing responsibly for the last 20 years. We serve individuals, families, and foundations, the majority of whom are right here in Massachusetts. This committee and the public of Massachusetts should know that our efforts as investors are part of a large, vocal, and global community of investors who believe that decisive action against climate change is essential for safeguarding our investments. And in the aggregate, that group represents a lot of money, serious money. Just last month, 217 investment institutions with more than 15 trillion with a T in combined assets backed the Paris Agreement and a range of measures to drive investment in a low-carbon economy. Those measures must include carbon pricing policy. Let's be clear, though. Let's be clear. Carbon already has a price. It's simply being paid by the wrong people.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have...
For the record, is Cynthia Lupi, and I'm the New England Director for Clean Water Action. I'm also the coordinator of the Massachusetts Campaign for a Clean Energy Future.
I'm Nancy Goodman, the Vice President for Policy at the Environmental League of Massachusetts.
I'm really excited to report today is that the coalition supporting carbon pricing is unanimously in support of Senator Barrett's carbon pricing bill and Representative Jen Benson's bill. Groups like the Sierra Club, like Interfaith Power and Light, like Healthcare Without Harm, like Mothers Out Front. These are very active groups who have come together in unity.
My name is Stephen Dodge. I'm Executive Director of the Massachusetts Petroleum Council. We are the local office of the American Petroleum Institute. We are testifying today in opposition to the three carbon tax bills. We feel that any state taxes that could substantially increase the price of gasoline, diesel fuel, heating oil, natural gas merit further study on the true economic impacts of that plan. These bills would raise the price of gasoline, diesel fuel, and heating oil in the state by between 8 to 17 cents a gallon in year one, escalating to a high of between 35 to 40 cents a gallon in the out years with virtually no end in sight. And assuming everything stays equal, by 2019, Massachusetts would have the highest gasoline and heating oil prices of any of our border states. Similar measures have been defeated or will soon be in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, New York. Even a study bill in New Hampshire is destined for defeat, and as you know, no other state has done this. So it is questionable whether any significant reduction in carbon emissions in Massachusetts would have any meaningful effect should those reductions even occur under the scenarios specified in these bills. The EIA ranks Massachusetts 44th in the nation for total energy consumption. We are a small fish in a big ocean. Massachusetts simply does not hold a large enough share of the national consumer market to drive major changes in the marketplace by incentivizing renewable energy technologies.
My name is John Nunnery. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts chapter of the American Institute of Architects. With me is Jim Stanislawski. He's the chair of our Government Affairs Committee.
I work for the largest architectural firm in the U.S., working on major projects here in Boston and around the globe. Why would we care? I mean, we don't pay our clients' energy bills. A very small percentage of us get any sort of incentive for designing green. Why would we care? I think the simple answer is that our number one mission as architects and designers is to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. But in addition to caring about the aesthetics of this room and how wide the exit doors are, we are caring about the number of watts these lights are putting out. We're caring about the wastewater going to Deer Island. We're caring about the amount of air conditioning used for this room. I mean, there are professional competency areas that our profession is very passionate about. Hundreds of firms have signed what's called the 2030 commitment. So myself and my colleagues have committed to designing buildings by 2030 that are carbon neutral. You know what I hear over and over again? It's going to make me scream if I hear it one more time. Sorry, Jim. Natural gas is just too cheap. Again and again and again. And why is that? Well, it's simple. The true costs of fossil fuels are not in our utility bills. So we've heard from others today about the human and health tolls. Those are the real costs. To end aspirationally, the first state to abolish slavery, first public school, first public park, first state to pass major health care reform. We have to stop thinking small. This is huge. We know that. These are big, bold actions that are basically about the public good.
My name is Michael Ferranti. I'm the president of the Mass Energy Marketers Association, which is the trade association for the home heating oil industry. We represent about 350 companies.
Again, my name is Christopher LaBeouf. I'm currently the chairman of the board of directors of the Mass Energy Marketers Association. Our association voices its strong opposition to these legislative proposals because if enacted, they will have a detrimental impact on hundreds of companies, thousands of employees across the Commonwealth, and significantly affect the cost of fuel and services to our customers. If enacted, over time, the cost of home heating oil and diesel fuel could rise as much as 45 cents per gallon. For the average homeowner using about 800 gallons of heating oil per year, this would equate to a $360 increase in their energy bills. Our industry has been a partner in seeking to improve energy efficiency, reduce our fuel usage. For example, in the past 15 years, the amount of home heating oil sold in Massachusetts dropped 200 million gallons. A lot of that has been promoted from our own industry as we seek to improve our customers' efficiency, installing modern home heating oil equipment. In addition, we're also expanding the use of biofuels in our industry. Many retailers are now selling ultra-low sulfur heating oil and with a blend of 20% biofuel. This reduces heating system maintenance and is actually a cleaner blend than natural gas.